amazing that there's like, what, 20 people here and I'm still nervous. Okay, so first is a story about the story that I'm gonna tell you. I do story slams, and if you're not familiar with those, or if you haven't heard of The Moth on NPR.
Yeah, The Moth is
okay, they give you a theme, and then you have 5 minutes to tell your story from memorization. You're not allowed to use notes or anything like that, and then the audience votes at the end on the winner. So the two that I did before this one last week was before recovery. And in order to get up there and tell my story, there was a lot of booze involved. And propanolol, I don't know if you guys know what that is. Stops the adrenaline so you don't shake. So there was a lot of substances involved. So when I got up with all of these substances, I wasn't nervous. And I like remembered everything. I did really well. So I didn't know how it was gonna go last week sober. And they pick, so you stand up and you recite your first line, and the audience votes on that. And the best first line gets to choose in what order they want to perform. So my first line is killer, and what do? I say, oh, I'll go up first, to get this over with. So I was shaky and my mouth was dry, and I thought I completely bombed. Like, I was crying. I went back to my seat and I was in tears. Turns out it wasn't so bad. And I'm not gonna tell you what place I took, because that's part of the story. So the theme for the night was catch, and that's all they give you, and then you can do whatever you want with it. Okay. It was New York City in the 1980s, and my dreams of being a gay man had been shattered. It's not that I had gender dysphoria necessarily. I just really wanted to hang out in the clubs every night and dance and have unbridled fun, unself-conscious fun, which is the life that I imagined gay men had. But this was the 1980s in New York City, let's be real. To be a gay man could be fatal. I was working as a secretary at a really prestigious hip ad agency on Madison Avenue, and I shared an apartment with Kelly and Jonathan. Kelly was the secretary who sat across from me, also from Long Island, and Jonathan worked in the creative department. Jonathan was gay, and he was living the life I thought I wanted to live. I'm never really sure why he hung out with me and Kelly, because we were both high hair, big shoulder pads from Long Island. They called us bridge and tunnel girls. Nevertheless, we had a really good time together, and we made good roommates. Jonathan wasn't the cleanest of guys, and he brought home men pretty frequently to spend the night. I had noticed that he was emaciated, but when he got sick, I panicked. This was the 80s. You didn't know how you could catch AIDS. We shared a bathroom, a kitchen, the floors, we breathed the same air. I panicked. I called Kelly aside and I said, Kelly, I think Jonathan has AIDS. She panicked and the two of us moved out, a decision that I would later regret. Jonathan died 3 weeks later of pneumonia. This was the start for me of years of AIDS paranoia. Every trip to the dentist was a fiasco, with me looking over my shoulder to make sure the equipment was sufficiently sterilized. Manicures, which were practically a wardrobe essential in New York City, were a thing of the past. I had a boyfriend at the time. He got a cold. 2 o'clock in the morning, I had him on the phone with the AIDS hotline. They said, sir, you have a cold, go back to bed. Well, not only did he not go back to bed, I never spoke to him again. He left. After I left the ad agency, I worked for a Medicaid eligibility software company, which had us touring Medicaid hospitals in the city, filled with men in their beds, emaciated, dying. It was heartbreaking, and it was tragic, and it was terrifying. We still weren't 100% sure how you got AIDS. And curiously, no one was working on a cure or a vaccine. They had told us that the virus could lie dormant in your system for up to 10 years. So when I moved to Boulder about 3 or 4 years later, the only way to know if I was carrying the virus and to protect any intimate partners that I was gonna have was to get tested. So I did, 3 times. On my third visit to the People's Clinic to get tested, the counselor called me into his office to give me my third negative result, and he asked me why I was there. I proceeded to list the plethora of life-threatening encounters I had had with the disease over the years. He looked at me and he said, "Jean, you are not at risk, and I don't want to see you here again. I'm perhaps the first person to be kicked out of the AIDS testing clinic." As the years went on, my fear of AIDS subsided, but what didn't subside is my hypochondriacal paranoia of getting any disease. My hypochondriacal catastrophizing of every ailment that I have. Now, let me just tell you right now that I am incredibly healthy. I never get sick. I never even get a cold. But I do have ailments. For instance, I have irritable bowel syndrome. I mean, what person with anxiety doesn't have irritable, right? In my case, I'm pretty sure I have a tumor blocking my intestine. I get this sharp pain in the back of my neck. The doctors told me it's a nerve. But I don't understand why a nerve would hurt unless there's something pressing on it, right? So I'm pretty sure I have a tumor in the back of my neck. I have tinnitus, ringing in the ears. Well, no one knows how you get tinnitus, but I know. The tumor that's in the back of my neck has metastasized and is moving to the base of my skull. So given this information about me, it's pretty remarkable that for the past 2 years, I haven't worried about getting COVID at all. I wear a mask when I'm told to, I follow protocol, I've been jabbed 3 times, but I did have one incident that concerned me. Right when the quarantine was lifted and I went back to the gym, I ran into a friend of mine named Tom. Tom is gay and he's HIV positive. He gave me a huge sweaty hug and a maskless kiss. And I was really taken aback. I'm like, why isn't he worried about COVID? Well, he's not worried about COVID because he's living with HIV. And curiously, 40 years later, there is still no cure and no vaccine. He's pretty frustrated by the rush to find a vaccine for COVID. But nevertheless, I walked away from that encounter not afraid of AIDS at all, but afraid that I had COVID, so I got tested 3 times. The third time, my doctor asked me why I kept getting tested, and I told him about my encounter with Tom. He said, "Jean, if you've been tested two times already and it's been negative, you're fine. I promise you. Please stop wasting our resources." As of late, I've been pretty calm about my imminent death. But a couple of weeks ago, I went to visit a friend in the hospital. It turns out she has C. diff, which is a very contagious infection. So now I'm pretty sure I have one of those really quiet infections that's eating away at my internal organs, and I'm gonna die a slow, miserable death. So I wanna thank you all for listening to my story, because on my bucket list is to get first place in a story slam. So if I win tonight, I may die in peace. I did not win, I got runner-up.
There you go.
How dare they? Runner-up peace.
So now you gotta go against George.
Oh, come on now. That was really good. This is way better.